Hey guys, Thomas DeSilla Jr. here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review The Mountain Between Us, another catch-up review. So, before I get into it, I think I've seen this trailer once. I also saw that the other reviews, the initial reviews, if you will, weren't all that positive for this movie. So that actually got me intrigued to see it for myself and see if it wasn't really all that great to begin with. So the movie follows this woman named Alex and this man named Ben. Both are traveling for two different reasons. And upon discovering that both of their different flights have been canceled, they decide to seek out assistance from another man who just so happens to have a plane. This man's named Walter. He's their pilot. He's traveling them to, I believe they were traveling to Idaho. But before they can arrive, their plane starts to descend as Walter is now freaking out. I believe it was due to a heart attack or something along those lines. The plane crashes down, and from there, Ben wakes up first. The pilot is dead, and now it is up to him to take care of Alex and sort of figure out the situation as they are in this sort of snowy area. Oddly enough, this movie never indicates where they really are, and yeah, I actually don't know where they are. They're in some bizarre, odd snow area. I don't know. Anyway, so he's looking around, scavenging for parts, and they also have a dog with them. And this dog does play a part later on in the movie, interestingly enough. So he's looking around, and eventually Alex does wake up. So she's injured in the leg, so she's unable to move as freely as he is. So he has to go out. They do see like a plane. They try to get its attention with a flare gun. It doesn't work. The woman, Alex, lays down how much time they would have left based on this sort of rule. I'm assuming that's the official, like, how long someone can survive without these three things, like food, water, and air. So the two try to get to know each other, or at least she's trying to, like, question him. She just happens to be a journalist, so, you know, her questioning kind of goes along with that sort of vibe. So she tells him to go start this climb to the top of this cliffside, and he does his best to make it up there. And as he's gone, this cougar attacks the tent, and the dog fends it off for a bit. And she takes care of the rest as she scrambles to get the flare gun and shoot it at the cougar to kill it, essentially. So they eat that out of desperation, of course. So now that the situation has gotten to this point, she figures, we have to start moving. So she's moving on ahead, and he stays behind. He's like asleep at this point. And she takes the dog. And when he wakes up, he tries to create this SOS, but it doesn't seem to do anything for him. And as she's slowing down, he's like, ah, damn it, I gotta head out. So he heads out, and eventually does catch up. And now it's his turn to ask about stuff, and like ask about, or talk about what he does. So they're getting to know each other throughout this adventure. They eventually find themselves a cave, so they're climbing down the hill that they are on. They find that the beacon that would have had them located sooner was destroyed, so her gut instinct was actually correct. And this movie does a pretty good job, I would say, of creating this sort of story between heart and logic. It balances them out pretty decently, all things considered, and I do appreciate that much of the movie. Um, One thing I will say here is that the pacing is kind of really cut. Like every scene is like bam, cut, bam, cut. But I could say in that defense is that at least it's consistent. Um, which I don't know if that's a good or bad thing necessarily, but it is something to point out. So, anyways, as they're heading down further down this hill, they eventually see this. The girl, Alex, sees this white flash, and they want to head. She wants to head toward it, but the initial path was sort of this like cliffside that they would have probably died at. So, and it's like this waterfall. So, like, with her leg, she probably wouldn't have been able to do this properly at this point in time. So he tells them that he's pretty sure at this point that they're going to die. And again, that goes back to the heart versus logic thing. So as they're relaxing in this little, like, snow mini cave. It's not really a cave, but it's like sort of an opening, I guess. His phone is dying, but he decides to play them a little song. And he's like, "Oh, I want you to take my last picture." So she has a camera. That's how they were able to find that glow or shine. And from there, we see that she talks about how she was with this other girl and how she took her picture and how that made her not want to take his picture because that girl that Alex was referring to died, and she kind of associated like, oh, if I take his picture, he's going to die. So they start like mini sliding down this mini hill, and the guy's like, you know what, we're alive. That's why we're going this way. We're just whatever. And at this point, they're starting to like eat the ice, so they're getting to that desperation point. And he the Ben starts chasing the dog, and he eventually finds a cabin. So the cabin is abandoned, but it does give them an opportunity to sort of just relax for a moment instead of being out in the snow. Unfortunately, Alex was in this sort of ice that was melting, so she falls in. Now, to call this part a miracle, because I'm pretty sure how long she was in the water, she would have probably actually really died, but he does manage to get to her and rescue her and bring her back to the cabin. So he's looking around, and he gives her a shot of something. I'm not sure what it was. I just wrote he gave her some sort of shot of something. Anyways, she eventually stirs, and she starts to get back to her self. And he's like feeding her and stuff, and they talk about how they've now been gone for 3 weeks, which is one of the rules of like, that's how long you could go without food, I believe it was. And they only have so much food left. So he heads outside, and she's like listening to his phone to try to understand his situation, because he was very reserved throughout the movie. So he arrives to see that she was doing that, and he talks about how his wife got sick or got some sort of tumor, I believe it was, and he had to be the one to treat her and couldn't deal with the situation. So before he heads out, they now decide to share a kiss. Now, one of the one of the bigger critiques of this movie is that the sort of romance that happens just sort of happens, and they kiss again, and it does lead to a sex scene. Now, the woman, Alex, is planning to get married. She does have someone as she mentioned earlier in the movie, and I kind of understand the critique to an extent. And they were trying to get to know each other, and they do, an okay job with it. But I think this love story has more to do with the survival aspect of why they got together. It wasn't so much that they were getting to know each other. It was more like, we are going to die. We just might as well do this thing because it's just us, and it's out of desperation. It's just in the moment, sort of going through. But I understand the critique because it does come back later on in the movie. So, anyways, after their little sex scene, she now decides to take his picture. So that sort of like potentially alludes to his death, but it doesn't happen. Don't worry. Spoiler alert, I guess. And now he's like, carrying her, and they're going off, and they manage to get back outside, and they're deep in there, and they end up like drifting into a sleep when they're like both heading outside. So the dog that I mentioned earlier is now getting in on the action of essentially saving both of them. First saving Ben by rolling him down the hill, which enables him to wake up. So, no, he's outside, and he's going further on ahead as she sort of gets, he's like, yeah, I have to find some place. So he finds this, like, he sees the steam, so he gets back up the hill and takes her back down. So they're following the steam, and the dog like moves them to a certain location, and Ben follows once again, only to get caught in a bear trap. Now, when I first saw this, I actually kind of was expecting him to die. Not so much like I was hoping for him to die, but I was like, okay, this is gonna be that moment where it's gonna be like that noble sacrifice sort of story. And I don't know if I would have appreciated that more, but it just kind of cuts when she like runs to get help. Like, you see him fall down, and then she runs to get help, and then it cuts, and they're suddenly in a hospital. Like, it just sort of happens. Again, sort of that pacing that was consistent is sort of now bad, because you kind of just go, well, what happened there? You have to just assume a lot that he just was saved at that point in time. And the movie takes a bizarre turn where they are now in the hospital, they're talking and whatever, and her husband arrives, and her actual first husband. And we see Ben see this going on, and he kind of just goes back to what he was doing, except now he has the dog with him. He goes back to his job, he goes back to his home. It's like, and she's like, I'm still thinking about him, so I'll send him the pictures that I took. And she's like trying to call him, waking up from this like cough moment that I thought was more serious, but it ended up being nothing. So she takes out, or he, I don't remember who takes out the pictures. I believe he had them at this point, but yeah, anyway. So he like, calls her back, and then they meet up, and then she explains that she didn't end up marrying Mark. And then they leave this little bar place that they were in, or whatever it was. And he like calls himself an idiot for saying something earlier in the movie. I didn't write down what he said, but they end up hugging. They end up moving in separate directions, and they're thinking about all the stuff that happened, and they both stop and come back to each other in embrace. And that is the end of the movie. Now, again, I do understand the gripes against this movie. The pacing is definitely a bit odd. The relationship is more, as I would say, primal more than it was an actual relationship, and it just so happened in the end they happened to get together. And I get that that whole romance sort of was based on something more, again, primal. And that, I do understand that critique because of the end of the movie. And again, I was actually expecting him to die at that bear trap point, and I was expecting her to sort of take on that weight of loss, but no, there's this sort of happy ending, and whatever. I would give this movie a 6 out of 10. It was enjoyable, but again, that pacing definitely was a bit choppy, and I do understand how the relationship can be sort of like this weird, murky, whatever place. Anyways, that is my review of this movie, and if you enjoyed it, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. As well to check out that link in the description, as it will lead you to my Patreon, and I definitely could use any amount that is given, so please consider it. And until next time, everyone, bye!